everyone, and welcome to this FMB webinar on the 14th of October. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I hope everyone watching is well. There's been an unexpected change to our programme this time around. We were expecting to have Alison Warner, the business coach, joining us for the webinar today, but she's not able to join us for family reasons. So I'm very grateful to Joanna Mulgrew from HBXL, who has stepped into the breach and is going to be presenting the whole of this webinar content today. And having had a sneak preview of Jo's slides, I know that that's going to be really useful for everyone who's attending today. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you to Jo. So I just want to remind you that you will receive a follow-up email, which will have a link to the recording of the webinar and also a PDF copy of the slides that Jo's sharing. So don't worry about trying to note everything down as she goes through, because there's quite a lot of complex calculations and numbers in there, as you would expect. So please feel free afterwards as well to share the link to the recording with anyone in your business that it might be relevant for them to see as well. So without further ado, I will hand over to Jo, and also please note that you can submit any questions that might occur to you during the presentation in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will deal with those at the end of the presentation. So Jo, if you're there, if you'd like to put your camera on and your microphone on, then I'll hand over to you to share your screen and start the presentation. Thank you.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for having me, and thank you for listening. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, and we can crack on. So I hope you've all had a good day, and you're ready to listen to what we've got to talk about today, which is this focus on knowing your numbers and growing your sales and profit. It's a challenging subject right now, with everything being so volatile in the marketplace. So a quick intro to me and what I know about building, you might be wondering. So my name's Jo Mulgrew. I'm the Group Operations Director at HBXL Building Software, and I've spent the last 20 years of my life in construction software, so it's an area I know well. And as a bit of background, my father was a general builder. He must have built, say, 300 or so extensions and about 80 houses. He moved from being a smaller builder into property development and then into property investment. So he changed his business over his career. And I've renovated several properties myself for profit. So I've got a fair understanding of the challenges that you face and how difficult it is to juggle everything in running your business. So I thought I'd start at the beginning, as all good presentations should, which is the challenges that I know you're facing today. And all these areas are eating into your profits day by day, quietly in the background without you even knowing it. So we've got long lead times on many materials. And I was just reading this morning that there's rising costs of tiles now because of the gas problems. We all know about timber being ridiculous, metalwork. Everything is rising, and those costs of materials are again eating away at profits of jobs that you've previously quoted on. Obviously, there's rising labour costs because there's shortages of teams and subcontractors because people are so busy with so many projects on the go. And obviously Brexit hasn't helped that. And obviously equipment, I know of some builders having problems with getting skips and scaffolding and what have you, and it's going up as well. And obviously add a splash of COVID compliance for good measure, although that's somewhat eased off, I guess, but that has been somewhat costly, if not of your time to get right. And irrespective of the big challenges we've got today, there's all the usual for every single builder that we speak to at HBXL Building Software, which is there's not enough hours in the day, tight margins at the best of times, sometimes a sense of a loss of control of projects and the business, so much paperwork, whether it's quoting, responding to emails, health and safety, documentation, getting through planning. It's really tough juggling all of that. and the firefighting of the day-to-day challenges that pop up on site that were unplanned for. So we hear a lot of building owners are working really, really hard without necessarily the profits at the end of the year. And why might that be? So I think it's often because building firm owners are running their companies focusing on the building, the area that they're really good at, very, very skilled at and have pride in their work, and less focusing on the business side of their day-to-day. And building is all consuming. It takes up a lot of time, and it just doesn't work long term now. At some point, no doubt, you want to get off the tools. You want to perhaps put money into your pension. You want to grow your business. Hayley, I've just seen you pop up.
Yes, I've just popped up because that would be the perfect point for us to introduce one of the poll questions for our members.
Oh, lovely.
Where they are with this issue. Yeah. I hate to interrupt your flow, but if we could just do that, and then I'll hand back to you. So the first question is about business profitability and whether members are finding that their business profitability has changed over the past couple of years, whether they're becoming more or less profitable, staying about the same, or don't quite know. So I'll just give that a couple of seconds for members to complete that, and then we'll share the answers with everybody. But I think given your summary of what they're up against at the moment, it won't be surprising if they're finding it difficult. Yeah,
that's perhaps hard to know, because if where people's financial year is, it's actually been a tough year for people, but I guess they'll have a sense of that.
Yeah, it may be that they don't quite know until they have the next meeting with their accountant.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so I can see that about 3/4 of the members attending have answered the poll. So I'll end that there and share the results. And we can see that most people are saying that they're staying about the same, but there's a fair smattering across all of the answers. So some are more profitable, some are a bit less, some are not quite sure, probably because they haven't had that all-important meeting with the accountant yet, and others are saying that they're becoming less profitable. So they're in the right place to find out a bit more about things to do about that. Yes. So I'll stop sharing that now, and I'll hand back to you to continue with the presentation.
Thank you. I guess on that point, and before I carry on, it's really important to have regular contact with your accountant, or have somebody within your business that is managing finance side. I often hear about building firms saying, right, well, I won't know how much I've made until the end of the year. I find that very difficult to understand. You could be walking into big challenges next year if you're not having more regular communications and understanding your cash flow. So especially with prices rising and inflation as it is, I think it's really important to be focusing on that if nothing else.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jo. Thanks for letting me butt in.
No problem. So I guess continuing on with that, you need to be running your business as a business, not just a building site, and that involves having a tight grip on your finances, as we've just been talking about, and having smart admin processes and joining up some of that process. So whether it's estimating it into accounting software, or smarter ways of writing up your quotes, or using cloud-based project management tools. And having a plan for the future, you need to have a think about what it is you're trying to achieve over the next year to 5 years, and maybe using technology in the mix to help with some of that. So a business is made up of, as we've just been saying, a business plan, the financial matters, the legal matters, your health and safety, customer service, personnel management and HR, and hiring subcontractors and so on, and marketing the business. And I'm sure I've missed some areas out from there. And in a building company, then some construction on the side. Obviously today, the construction is all consuming. It's the sole kind of focus of most building owners, and the other areas are more peripheral. They spend far less time on them. Whereas in lots of other businesses, it's the other way around. You've got a firm business plan that you're working towards, and you've got somebody in finance managing things. perhaps got somebody in operations like me looking at health and safety and personnel. So with the focus being solely on the construction side, it deviates away from these essential business matters. It's easy to kind of get distracted with the day to day, and a lot of people say to me, I'm just sucked into firefighting continuously, and I'm not enjoying things anymore. Or I would like to actually grow the business, which involves stepping back and having a think about where you'd like to be. So I was saying maybe you might want to get off the tools, maybe you might like to work from home and not be on site all the time, or maybe you want to hire someone to do the estimating so that you or your business partner or wife maybe even aren't doing the estimating. Or do you want to move the kind of work that you're doing from, say, smaller works and residential works into property development? So to do any of that, you need to have a plan. And at the very least, think about a business forecast. So that's the detailed costs of your business for at least the next 12 months. It stands to reason that you need to be accurately costing the cost of each job. And I'll come to square meter prices or square foot prices in a minute, and well-worn spreadsheets that have probably got a lot of experience in them. But those aren't going to accurately cost your building work. It just doesn't really cut it, particularly in today's marketplace where prices are rising so hugely. The complexity of work and the materials involved, and just the general pressures on the business. So I'd hazard that you don't use those methods. So price accurately to cover your construction costs. Then be really aware of your business overheads. So the business overheads is everything that is not the construction related, the cost of sale effectively. It's about the costs such as insurance, your loans, your van hire, your mobile phone, your website costs, your time as the owner or the manager of the business. And that needs to be costed up in detail. And HB Excel has got a spreadsheet which would help you with that to populate your core business overhead. And then you need to be looking at inflation and what is going on with inflation and how it's going to impact the jobs that you're taking on in 6, 9, 12 months' time. And then adding your profit on top of that. And when you do that, make it a decent profit margin. And we'll discuss that again in a moment. I keep saying there's so much to talk to you about today, and it all links together. But I would hazard if you are estimating and quoting and securing jobs for later in 22, I mean, we've got lots of customers speaking to us saying, I've got work, I'm working to next spring, summer of 22. Well, what is going to happen with material costs by that point? Are you quoting your customer today's prices or the future prices? So you've got to be conscious of that. But starting with, if I may, the profit margin, the basic percentage. A lot of firms operate, and it's not just builders, but a lot of firms will calculate their profit on the basis of labour, materials and plant, and then they add up a market percentage, say 10%, and then that's their quote. And here's an example of something where I want to show you that in action. So say they've added the materials, the labour and the plant up for a job that's going to cost 121,739 to be exact. And we want to add a 10% markup. So that 10% of 121,739 is just over £12,000. So they then add those two together. So the job cost plus this, what they think is a 10% markup. And there's this new quote, 133,913. But if you read the line below, unfortunately, you're actually going to be making less than 10% if you do this calculation. And it's actually just a simple maths error, actually, that a lot of people make. Because if you then take that profit, that 10% we thought we calculated, and divide it over this total cost, it's actually 9%. It doesn't come out at 10%. So you've already lost some of your margin already. So that is why when you just add a simple 10% or 15%, whatever your number to your job, you're actually making less because it's not a straight 10% or 15% to your quote. And I'll show you a working example of this in a minute because it's quite complicated. So this this is the formula of how you should actually calculate your gross profit. So it's your profit in pounds divided by the price that you quote your client, so the sales price, times 100% gives you your profit. So you actually need to be adding not 12,000, just over 12,000, you actually need to be adding 13,513 to your job to actually get to a 10% profit. So your new job cost would be 135,000. So if you work that through to get to this figure, this true 10% margin, you actually have to multiply your original job cost, the basic cost, by just over 11% to get your 13,500 marker. So you've got your job cost plus your new 113, so your 13,513. You've now got your new quote of 135,000. And so you've made over £1,300 more by actually calculating your profit margin that bit more accurately. So just to summarise that, 13,513 over the total now, the 135, times by 100 gives you a quote with a 10% margin. All right. So you've made more with this correct calculation. So I'll just show you that again. So you can Google this, by the way. This is how you work out your profit margin. It's your profit in pounds divided by your sales price times by 100% gives you your profit. And that's that worked example. All right. So I know that Hayley and the team will send you that if you want a copy of the PDF of the slides. We then have to think about our overheads in our profit calculation. And a lot of firms that we talk to at HBXL Building Software say, well, you know, I add an element for my profit margin, I just stick 10 or 15% on, but I don't really think about adding anything for my overheads. That margin kind of covers that. Well, actually, it really doesn't. Your profit margin should be ending up in the bank. You should be charging your client for the overhead of running your business. So this can be summarized as I said before, if you've got no work on at all, your business still has costs. So that is wages. That, for example, is you, the business owner, and all of your time, your van insurance, obviously fuel, your insurances of all types, your accountancy fees, and you should obviously be seeing them more regularly, as we were just talking about, having to replace tools and equipment. You might have finance fees, your bank fees, loan repayments. So all of that has to be added, and a percentage of it added to each and every job that you take on. And people often forget about those costs when they're calculating a job, and they kind of focus on the actual build costs. But you need to add on overhead, the cost of running your business to every job. So one way of doing it is just to tot up your whole year's cost for these and then divide them up into, say, 48 weeks, if you have 4 weeks holiday, hopefully you do. And then you get a weekly overhead and you can allocate that to each job, so that every job has an element of the insurance, an element of the van and the petrol and your time. And you can allocate that then to every job appropriately. So in a simple job, say 6-month job, you would add half your annual overheads to that job, and then you put your markup, your margin on top. But if you have lots of jobs that are overlapping, I realise it's a bit more complicated to calculate. But a lot of firms, building firms, have overheads of around 15% of their turnover. You can obviously calculate yours if you look at last year's accounts with your accountant. He might say it's 14% or 17% or whatever your number is. But what you should then do is, when you have any job, basic job costs, you should then add the 14 or the 70%, whatever is your number, to the job costs, and that will ensure that you cover your core business overheads. And then you need to add your overhead on top. So doing that with that job that we were talking about before, so there was our £121,000 job, and we're allowing a 15% overhead, and that's actually £18,000, just over. So we add those two together and we get a new job cost of 140,000. So this is, in this example here at the moment, there's no profit margin. This is just the cost of the job plus our overheads cost, and we get 140k. So if we charge that 133,000, like we said before, with that kind of incorrect 10% markup, we would have actually lost money on the job because we haven't calculated in any detail. We've missed all our overhead costs. So you'd be making a loss just walking straight into that job. You'd be working all that time on that project and not making a penny. So if you don't allow for the overheads properly in your customer's quote, you're going to have to find it from somewhere, and that would be your pocket. So what do we do? Here's really how you end up needing to make sure you priced your job. You have your job cost. We have our 15% overhead. That's given us our new cost. We then add and calculate our markup, so that 11.1%. That gives us a new sales price of 155,540. And to work out if our margin there was 10%, we do our markup divided by sales price. So that's the 15,500 over the 155,500, and we get to our 10%. Now you might be wanting to make 15 or 20%. I'm only using 10% as an example, and I'm by no means recommending it, but it just makes it simpler for the maths. But you can see that compared to that original quoted price of £133,000, we have increased the cost of the job. And I know some people will say, well, I can't just put my prices up because I'm not going to be competitive if I do all of this. But the truth is, you have got this overhead in your business. Someone's got to pay for it. So you do need to calculate that. And you should, every business should be making a profit. So you should be adding at least a basic profit margin. So that is really the real cost to your client. And I guess you've got to think about how much value you're adding to that client's property. If you're doing them an extension or a kitchen refurb or a loft conversion, or you're adding a lot of value to their property, and they're buying your expertise. So you do have to do a bit of a sales job through everything you do in your business. We say in marketing that marketing is everything about your business. It's not just marketing, isn't just advertising or getting leads. It's about the whole approach to the business. But if you think about this as a whole business approach and charge appropriately for your costs, you'll start to see at the end of the year that you do have a decent residual cash in the bank following all your efforts. So an interesting one, just before we move on, is a point a colleague has made to me, which is not thinking about turnover, it's about thinking about markups. That's your margin. So here we've got this job, which is 140,000. I've got three different scenarios here for you. One is our 11%. We've worked through that. We've added 11% to the 140k job, and we've come out at 155.5. If you increased your markup, you felt confident enough to do that to 15%. So there you're making 21,000, and that would be a 13% net margin you've made. If you're more brave still and you charge 20% profit on your actual costs, you would end up with a markup of 28,000. There's your new sales price, and a net margin of 17% on that job. And what struck me is the difference between this first job at 15.5 and charging the 20% on this other scenario, and you end up with 28,000. So that's nearly double the profitability. And you say, of course it is, that's the maths. But wouldn't it be nice to do one job in this scenario rather than having to do two of these jobs at this lower margin? So by going for certain types of projects, with certain clients where you can charge a premium for your services because you do a great job, no doubt, you could have half the stress, half the workload, half the management effort, and end up with cash in the bank at the end of the year. So don't be thinking about chasing turnover. Think about how you can increase your actual markup for each project. And that does require a piece of work, because you can't, as I said before, just magically increase your prices overnight. But if you can demonstrate to your client that you're worth this, that you are a premium and building firm, then it's in no way impossible. So a question you could ask yourself is, am I subsidizing my client? And that might be, if you've got low overheads, your overheads are nowhere near 15%, 5% or 7%. That might be because you're on the tools yourself, you're building yourself. You're not a manager overseeing things. Perhaps you work from home, so you have no office costs. Your family members help with the paperwork and quoting and keep everything really tight cost-wise, so that you can win the work being fairly low cost. But you are subsidizing the client and their valuable property with all of your efforts. So if any of those ring true, and you're not including the costs as if you did have an office or you did have a site manager, please be sure that certain other builders in your locale will be charging for those, because they will have those costs. So do note that perhaps bigger or more established firms have got higher overheads, maybe as much as 20 to 30% at the top end, and they're having to charge this to cover their business costs, and they're still in business. And I'm sure you all know of one or two firms that you're probably reasonably envious of in your area, and you think, gosh, they get some good jobs, they get some nice properties to work on. Well, they'll have higher overheads, no doubt. So don't think about how to cut costs, but have a think about how you can increase your margin by demonstrating your value. And if you're a bit anxious about perhaps making such a change, the market is with you now. You've got the opportunity, when there are a lot of leads around, to quote properly, covering your overheads and your inflation. And if that quote doesn't come good, another job will come along, and you can do the same again. But all the while, you've got to be thinking about how you can demonstrate your value, how you can demonstrate to your client why you're worth that slightly higher price. And this should allow you to be choosing with the jobs that you take on. So you're correct, you're excuse me, you're quoting correctly if you are costing the work as if you're not on the tools, that you have got an employee. To get my teeth back in, you have one or more employees, paid employees, that you are putting money aside for your own pension, and that you have cash in the bank. That's how to know if you are quoting correctly. That is what other firms are having to do. So have a look at the last 3 jobs you've done, add in these extra costs, and see if it would have improved the margin that you'd have made on the job, or jobs plural. And I know this sounds like quite a big shift, but technology can help with these issues. And you'd expect me to say so, because I do work for HB Excel building software, but I genuinely believe that software can assist with big elements of this. So how can technology improve your profitability? Well, for a start, you need some decent estimating software, and a good estimating package will come with tools that have access to the very latest materials prices. So when you're quoting, you're using the absolute latest, what's going on in the marketplace today. And Estimator Express, our estimating software, is updated monthly currently, because the market is so volatile and there's so many price rises. So it's putting you in touch with the latest prices without the aggro of having to contact suppliers continuously to get latest prices. Good estimating software also will calculate your wastage of materials, and wear and tear, because obviously plant and equipment breaks down over time, or it goes walkies off site. So you need to be allocating a little bit of all of your equipment to each project. And by allowing a wastage for certain materials on site, it's ensuring that you don't have to go back for more, and you're not going to get stung either with small loads of whatever it is, slabs or just a bag of sand, they didn't arrive with the full load initially. So it's really important that you include wastage and wear and tear, and Estimator Express will help you with that. As we've said, and so I'm overstating this now, you need to be thinking about your overheads, and good estimating software will allow you to incorporate that within your quotation. You then need to add inflation to your quote. So if the job's not starting for 6 or 9 months because you're well booked up ahead, any quote that you deliver to a client, you do need to give them an inflated price for what is likely to be happening in that time frame. So you need to be quoting job start prices, not today's prices. And then, of course, it will allow you to calculate your profit margin on top of that. So a quick note on inflation, no doubt, because you'll be on the receiving end of invoices from your suppliers and what have you, you'll see that prices have gone crazy. It's the highest in a generation. I think there was a report in July which said construction cost inflation was up by 20% year on year. So the cost of building has risen by 20%. So back to that point about using square meterage and spreadsheets, you could be using out of date. I'm not saying that you are, because some of you might have quite sophisticated spreadsheets that you're updating with all the latest invoice information that you get in. But if you're carrying around in your head, you're using old spreadsheets, it's just going to neutralize your profit, because those are not calculating today's prices, let alone the inflated prices of 6-12 months of time when you're going to be working on those jobs in 2022. So it's important to note that today's prices are going to be instantly out of date, and job start date prices are what matter. And a good estimating package will allow you to rerun an estimate closer to the start of a project and see what has changed. Or if a customer goes quiet on you for 6 months and then says, "Oh, now I'm interested to go ahead," you can rerun the quote with the very latest. Obviously, your profitability will come from accurate quotes, but it also comes from effective management of the job. And those square meter rates and spreadsheets won't produce all the construction management data that you need, what you need and when and how much. Good estimating software will help you manage the job as well. So you have everything at the right price, right time, that you feel organized and in control, but that you haven't underestimated your resource requirements. There's no racing off to get something from a merchant. I heard yesterday talking to a building firm that they had 2 directors in the car racing around to try and find paving slabs, as they'd under ordered on paving slabs, and they've gone around 5 different suppliers and they still couldn't find the product that they were looking to finish the job and get paid. So that's quite risky at the moment if you don't plan ahead, you're not organised in your buying. And obviously, if you haven't got stuff on site, I expect those 2 directors I was talking about had a ground worker or somebody like that just waiting for these resources to turn up. So no navel gazing. And obviously, the higher costs of plant skips and so forth. If you're behind schedule, they cost you. Time is money, as they say. So you need to be on it, managing tightly. So a good estimating package will have all your cost reports, your stage payments, so what your client should be paying and when. It should produce material schedules, plant schedules, labour schedules, so you know exactly what you need and when. And that will often be plugged into an onboard build programme. So as the build programme changes, so will the schedules of what you need to have on site and when. Those same build programs will be linked into your time-based profit forecasts and your cash flow. So you'll have all of this at your fingertips. So everything we've talked about before should be made easy with a good estimating package. And as I was just saying, you should have a build program within your estimating tool. And that will then have the phases of the work all plugged into the lead times of what you need and when, so that you can ensure you've got it all on site appropriately. And I know people often say to me, "Oh, no project ever goes to build program." So almost like, what's the point? But if you can start off organized, you can try and stay organized through the information, through your build program, through your recascaded material and plant schedules and what have you. Because as that build program changes, so do those forecasts of what you need and when. So I'm nearly there. I'll sign off and hand back to Hayley in just a moment. But I would ask you the question: is the job, or are the jobs, profitable enough that you are planning on taking on? And I know that estimating is quite a challenge. It takes time. It takes some skill as well. But doing it properly, often takes a wee bit of time. So estimating software can ease that burden, and it can save a huge amount of time on each quote, which means that if you've estimated each of those jobs properly, you can decide, say you've got 2 inquiries this week from 2 different prospective clients, you could estimate both of those effectively, and you can decide whether one of those or the other looks like it's a better bet in terms of the ultimate profits that would result from the project. So looking at, is the job profitable enough, and being a little bit choosy about the work that you take on. So if you'd like to know more about Estimator Express, there's our contact details. I won't leave that on too long because I know Hayley will be sending contact info. But if you're interested in Estimator Express, you can have a demo, or you can also trial it for free for 14 days. And on that note, I would say that if you've got jobs booked into 2022, I would rerun them as soon as you can, and to see what that inflated price will be. And you can use your Estimator Express trial to have a look at the job cost. And I think you might be quite surprised at the cost of work in 6 months' time, and what inflation will have done to the cost that you quoted to your client. So I'll stop sharing there. And I know Hayley's there.
Fantastic.
Hi there.
Hello, Jo. So I think that that presentation should probably be required viewing for a lot of our newer members, who have recently joined the FMB, who perhaps haven't been in business all that many years. I think they will get some really useful tips and information from the presentation. And as you say, we will send the slides out to members with an email afterwards. So you've given us an awful lot to think about there,
yes,
Jo.
Sorry, guys, if I bombarded you. There is a lot to take in. So
there is.
Watch it again.
Yeah, it's made me think, about with the very small, narrow profit margins that some members might be operating on. It only takes one small thing to go wrong during the course of a job to totally wipe that profit margin out altogether. So it's risky, isn't it, when profit margins are small like that? But if there was one point that you wanted members to take away from this session, Jo, what would it be?
Yeah, I guess it's don't sell your building firm short. I think the skills within your business, you have a huge amount of skill built up over time, and that I think often people feel compelled, building firms, that is, owners feel compelled to be pressured on price all the time. And I think you should be proud of your prices. It does cost a lot of money to build work of a good quality. It takes management time and expertise, and I think a lot of building firm owners don't build their own time, their own skill into the pricing of their work. So I would say, be proud of your prices, and then back it up with lots of evidence about why your building firm is the best. So that is your FMB certificates, your liability insurance, your health and safety sample documentation, examples of the work that you've done, genuine examples of work that you've done, before and after shots and what have you. Everything in your power to kind of, big your own firm up, because you are great and you should be proud to price accordingly. But I know that's easily said, but I would say so.
Really good advice, Jo. Thank you. Nicola has asked a question about, and this occurred to me as you were going through the presentation as well. So you're adding the profit margin on the top of the overheads. So your 11.1% includes that percentage of the overhead as well as the actual build cost.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I have seen it done both ways. So you could almost say, well, my profit margin is 15% and my overhead is 15%. So I'm actually adding 30. So you're basically timesing your job cost by 30%. Or in my example here, which I'd recommend, is that you are charging the profit margin on top of the total. So you've slightly doubled up on that, but you have got to manage that all of those insurances need booking in, all of the the running of your actual business deserves adding some of the margin to it. You're not doing that for free. So I guess it's whatever you're comfortable with, but I would recommend putting the margin on top of the already the job cost plus the overhead already, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Joe. So we will wrap up in a couple of minutes, but there is time for any last minute questions if anybody wants to pop a question in the Q&A box there before we go, on the basis that there is absolutely no such thing as a daft question. And if anybody's thinking of a question, there probably are other people thinking the same thing. So Rob's asked a question. In regards to live material price updates, his chosen supplier is MKM. Do you update from their prices in your system?
Unfortunately, we don't. And that's a historical thing in the sense that MKM operates, I think they call it like a federated business model, where each of the branches has that control of their own pricing. They don't have centralized pricing, unfortunately. So that's not something we have in place at the moment. So in that instance, it would be one of our national averages where we have a team that spend at least I think it's something like 20 Mondays every month, actually trawling all the suppliers' websites, bringing that pricing information together. Yeah. Okay. Sadly, no.
But they must be exceptionally busy at the moment then, because the prices are going up on a second by second basis.
Massively.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about the idea, Joe, that so a lot of our members have been discussing whether to charge customers for their time when they produce a quote?
That's a good question. I think that's a very personal point. I think, firstly, I mean, I don't think there's a right answer, and it depends, I guess, as well what your game is with charging for the quote. I know that some firms think, oh gosh, if I charge for it, I'm going to be putting off the client. Other firms think, well, actually, do you know what? My time is precious. I actually want to weed out any non-serious customers by charging. But I've been thinking about that actually. I think if you are charging appropriate overhead to every job, so that includes your own time as a fixed overhead, because you're not going anywhere. You run the business. Your time is there whether you're working on a project or not. For each job that you win, you will have your time already allocated as part of your overhead. So you're adding that back in to the job. So from that perspective, you will have already accounted for your time and quoting. But if you're trying to use it as a way of filtering customers, serious customers from those less serious, perhaps a nominal charge would be appropriate. It doesn't have to be, hundreds. It could be even something like £50 to say, look, it will take my time. I've got to prepare it. And in that way, if they're not being serious, they wouldn't go ahead. And I know that kind of politician's answer here, but it really depends on the client type as well. If it's a small, kitchen refurb, you might think, oh, do you know what, that's a bit excessive to charge. But if you are approached by a developer, to build a couple of houses, and he's expecting you to be a free quantity surveyor to tell him how much that is going to cost, and I think you would be, it would be right that you could charge, because he's using you for free when he should really be paying a quantity surveyor. So in that scenario, I would suggest that it would be quite sensible to. So I think there's probably no hard and fast strategic kind of answer, but I guess, so one thing on that, I would be asking the client, how many builders are you actually requesting quote for this work? Because if they're going for something ridiculous, like they've spoken to 5 or 10 for the project, obviously your chances of winning that work might be reasonably low, perhaps. So again, thinking about whether or not, if they are really interested in you charging for the services, again, it sorts them out. If they're just fishing really, and it's not worth your effort. I think, unfortunately, this is what puts off builders perhaps pricing effectively, because they're put on the spot to give a price without too much effort, which I fully understand, because it's hard work estimating, which is why I recommend obviously software to do it. But then you get locked into what's not really necessarily an accurate price. You end up, in a scenario where you're going to be losing money because you've misquoted, because you haven't spent the time on it. So you've given them a bit of an arbitrary price.
Sort of a ballpark figure that then goes wrong afterwards when you do the detailed quote. Yeah.
I've heard the final point on this before I guess I sign off on it is that I've heard that some building firms, they will do their initial ballpark free of charge. They'll say, it's going to be in the order of 80,000 or so, but I really need to sit down with you and go through the plans, your specification. Again, this is a way of filtering the good clients, because we want to be talking to good clients if we're going to charge a premium. So tell them this is your process. In order for me to quote, I need to sit down with you. I need to have a proper conversation. We're going to go through the drawings. You're then selling your skill as well. You're really bigging yourself and your firm up with your expertise. And then when you've only got, you've got the proper information, is your quote worth doing? Because they're halfway bought into you by that point.
We've got one last question, Jo, for you before you go, and it's right up your street, this question, because it's specific to HBXL software. So Ian's asking about the software adds 30% for profit and overheads as an equal amount. Can this be altered? So I suppose he's talking about changing the balance between what's overheads and what's profit.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can change the balance of that.
Yeah. Okay, so he might need to get in touch with your support team to figure out how. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's great stuff. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there for today. And I just want to say again, thank you very much, Jo, for stepping in at the last minute today. I'm sure it's been really useful. And like I say, it's essential viewing for a lot of members, I think. So we will be sending out the email with the slides and the link to the recording of the webinar for members afterwards, which I hope you'll find useful. And the next webinar is on the 2nd of November, when we will have a speaker from the Government Department Bays, when they'll be talking about the government's Help to Grow scheme, which can give funding for investment in digital technology and management skills. So that's on the 2nd of November. So it just remains to say thank you very much, Jo. Thank you to everybody who's attended, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.